Hey folks, I have some bonus episodes popping up for you. The first one is from TCAF of 2018. I want to give a thanks and shout out to Jamie Colville of World Balloon Academy for allowing me to share this audio from this panel between David Brothers, the homie, and the other homie, Ron Wimberly, who you will actually hear a couple different episodes from because Lab is coming out. So we took some time to talk about stuff. This was done, of course, at Toronto Comic Arts Festival. This is the radical application of the Black aesthetic. There will be a link in the show notes and the blog post to Jamie Colville's page with a bunch of different TCAF panels and previous panels from other comic conventions. I hope you will go click and go listen to go get that good information and good talks. I hope you enjoy. Look forward for more. These episodes come up on Patreon first. Patreon.com/Julian Lytle. You'll probably hear this at the end too, in my nice little outro. And again, thanks to Jamie and David. Enjoy.
Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Radical Application of Black Aesthetic. Before we get started, I would like to say a few words, and some of you probably heard me say this for the millionth time, and probably heard me butcher already. But the Toronto Comics Art Festival would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat, and that Indigenous peoples have lived on and cared for this land for more than 15,000 years. This territory is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wakman Belt Treaty. Today, Toronto is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that settlers on the land directly benefit from the process of colonization. In recognition of our gathering and on these lands of TCAF 2018, the festival has made a donation to Native, Child, and Family Services of Toronto. We look forward to increasing our support and programs for Indigenous creators in the years to come. And we would like to thank our sponsors. Programming at TCAF 2018 is sponsored by Seneca College's Faculty of Communication, Art and Design. TCAF would also like to thank our presenting sponsors, the Beguiling, Little Island Comics, and the Toronto Public Library. Thanks to our media sponsor, Now Magazine. And we also recognize the support of Canada Council for the Arts, the Ontario Arts Council, the Toronto Arts Council. Thank you, and everyone enjoy.
That's dope.
That was cool, right?
Y'all already got one up on us.
Also, my recorder just died, so Jamie, thank you for recording this.
Oh no, okay.
Let me get the mic.
Oh, yeah, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah. So this is the radical application of Black aesthetic. How many of y'all are people of color? Can I see a show of hands? Or self-identified? All right, how many of y'all are Black? Okay, so we're going to get into some shit, basically. Yeah. So I can read the explanation that you put in Lab Magazine.
Because I'm going to critique it. That's good, though. Read. Yeah. Oh, this.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, yeah, like, just do that. Yeah,
all right. Yeah. Let's see. I just had the footnote.
Should I read it, or?
Actually, yeah, that would be cool. Ooh, starts at the bottom left.
Okay. All right, yeah. That's cool, right? All right. The nigger aesthetic is a representation of the black body, black life, and the corresponding way of seeing and thinking about the black body, as informed by white supremacy's stigmatization of the black body and black life. Elements of the nigger aesthetic are the material qualities of the black body and black life, i.e. dark skin, nappy hair, singing, dancing, even pain and suffering, that have been stigmatized by white supremacy. The nigger aesthetic differs from the black aesthetic in that the nigger aesthetics function of stigmatization. Black aesthetic doesn't necessarily acknowledge the stigmatization of the black body or black life. The power of the nigger aesthetic is aptly summed up in the words of then President Woodrow Wilson after a White House screening of Birth of a Nation, cinema's first great application of the nigger aesthetics. It is like writing history with lightning, and my only regret is that it is also terribly true. And you guys know, Woodrow.
Yeah.
From Princeton to the White House.
So, you already got a question?
Well, no, would you guys mind introducing yourself?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So, I do these all the time, and I always mess this part up.
I'm David Brothers.
So this is Ron Wimberly, cartoonist, raconteur, you said?
I'm just a cartoonist. Yeah. You know,
communicator.
Yeah.
I'm David Brothers. I do stuff like this. I talk to people about comic books and hopefully teach people stuff. So we're here to talk about basically like the way the black body is cartooned or treated more generally in our pop culture, our natural culture, like cultural culture. One thing that struck me, what Ron was reading from, was from Lab Magazine, which drops this weekend. You'll have it at your table at TCAF?
Yeah. The Beehive table, my table. Yeah.
And what struck me is that the black aesthetic is something that was created by black people. You agree?
Well, yeah, I think... Yeah, okay, so I think the name, because blackness is kind of like in its own sort of way, politicizing and reclaiming like the stigmatization in a weird, so and certainly the codifying of it as well. Yeah, it's black people.
And the nigger aesthetic is a white creation.
Yeah,
that has been occasionally co-opted by black people. You called that a radical move. What makes it radical?
Wow. Okay, so it's funny because I just in Black History in Its Own Words, I talk. I had that Angela Davis quote, which is actually like Angela Davis quoting Marx, which is radical is to grab something or is to grasp something at its root. And I think a way of kind of misappropriating, right? The nigger aesthetic, that's radical in the sense that it acknowledges the political function of the nigger aesthetic, and that's identifying what it's meant to do, like in a social way, in a historical way, political, economic way. So that's why it's radical.
Do you think one of those ways that it's executed has like primacy over the other? Was it like we want to keep people down by depicting them this way, we want to make money by depicting them this way? What do you think the original thrust was?
Oh, well, that's a good question because I feel like it's original. I feel like it's just a product of the what was happening like historically and economically, and its function, whether it was produced to do what it is or not, is like, I don't know. That's another discussion. But its function is definitely to brand the black body and the black life as being something subhuman or something. It reifies that rift between black bodies and black life and the human being, I would say.
And one of the things, like when people stereotype the black body, it's like, oh, big lips, big butts. It's all human features taken to like an inhuman, like scare quotes, level. So when you're reclaiming it, like how do you factor in that kind of thing? Like how do you make it so that if you draw somebody with big lips, like we got this Joker image up here, like what makes this more interesting than like what Dartmouth was doing in the past?
Well, what and this is why I like the I forget exactly I was referring to earlier what the title of the panel is. I'm not sure I believe in the act of reclamation. I think I'm using something that is pretty dangerous, right? In a sense to maybe make an awareness in the audience or the reader of the political and historical subjectivity around the aesthetics. So to make the audience aware of, like, say, there's certain things that you may take for granted when you see a Sambo, right? Like, you may take for granted that, okay, well, this is meant to hurt me, right? And this is a bad image. So I think the way I want to use the image is to make people question or interrogate what and why, you know. So is dark skin bad? Like, are big lips bad? Or like, why are they bad? And why is this application of this making me feel bad? And like, what is the intent? Like, that's more my purpose, or hopefully the function of my aesthetics, as opposed to like, okay, well, any sort of direct reclamation. I think I'm using it. I don't know if it can be reclaimed, but I'm hoping that it can be used to provoke an awareness or subjectivity about the aesthetics, and maybe even more so, like, use those aesthetics to make an awareness about the function of maybe even white supremacy, more so than, like, you know, even the aesthetics. You know what I mean? Like, kind of like, look, you know, like, this is an image that's saying, look closely and carefully, and it's powerful. So like
understand me.
Yeah. Well, understand what your place and your positionality in the world, and why this image is making you feel this way.
Yeah.
You know?
Can you talk a little bit about this image, Cotton Club? Because there's a lot in this. Let's start with the Cotton Club.
Yeah, so the Cotton Club was a club. Now, I think was it Jack Johnson who it was bought from Jack Johnson by like a white gangster. It was a club where slummers, like white jazz listeners, could go uptown to Harlem and listen to jazz and see black performers, but only the performers were allowed to attend as performers. The Cotton Club.
Yeah.
Jazz Age.
And that's deep because we've got a very fraught history with cotton.
Yeah. To say the least. Right?
Yeah.
We're probably both wearing cotton too.
Right.
It's interesting. Yeah, like cotton was cotton, if you have a chance, see if you can pick up this book, Empire of Cotton. Like, cotton is, it's what industrialized Europe, and the network of industry built on war capitalism is what really pulled Europe, with Britain especially, ahead of everyone else. And what's really interesting is the network of labor, and that story, the story of cotton, is really what unifies like the dehumanized chattel slave and the narrative, that Marx and Engels was talking about, like the laborers and in Britain and in Germany. Like it kind of like pulls all that story together. But that's a completely different panel.
Yeah. Just as a sidebar, like on a related note, it trips me out that cotton and sugar were the two main things they had slaves working on. Like, I feel like God believes in irony.
Yeah.
But, so we've got the Joker, Mr. Joker. And it's a riff on, like, the DC Comics character.
Yeah.
But with specifically, like, Sambo features, which was something I had never thought about. Like, the big red lips, the, slick back hair. What were you expressing here?
Well, just like aesthetically, I was thinking about Cab Calloway, and I was thinking about the act of performing for a white audience, and sort of it's difficult for me there's an entire story I made for this, right? It's supposed to, right? And the following page, there's a description, and it essentially, it's as if Ellison I was thinking about if Ellison wrote, did a bootleg of Batman, and that's what the image is from. And I think about the Joker, and thinking about the Joker as a performer, and thinking about Jazz Age performers and having to perform black identity, and that's pre-black identity, having to perform the nigger aesthetic, and using that to survive, you know, and thinking about how twisted it is, and also in this newspaper I deal with the villain as well, and kind of like the notion of the relationship between the hero and the villain. And like for me, I've kind of always felt like the natural order, or the order as it is now, is antagonistic to me. So ultimately, wouldn't the villain be my hero? And any sort of, you know, any hero that's going to maintain the structure as it is now is actually like, you know, like actually
basically the police.
Yeah. Like I would believe in the villain. Like the villain is bringing something that could be new.
Yeah, or at least different. Also, the Spade Flush Band.
Yeah.
Is there so many like old timey slurs for black people that like people just don't know about anymore?
Right. Yeah.
But let's talk about performing blackness. You mentioned that a minute ago.
Yeah.
So this is a clip from Jay-Z's Story of OJ, where he played a character called J-Bo. While he's talking about like how if you're black in America, it doesn't matter what you have. Like you'll be black forever. And I think that Jay-Z's performing a specific type of blackness, like black capitalist. Like, if you have money, here's what you spend it on. Here's, like, the smart way to be rich. How do you feel, like, in your work, you very often work with black themes. How do you feel about performing blackness for an audience that might not be in the same demographic or have the same kind of foundation?
I mean, that's why it's, like, really... It's fraught, right? And I'm always learning. I'm always dealing with it. You know what I mean? Like, even right now, you know? I'm thinking about how I can create work that... provokes that question in the viewer, you know, like more so than anything. And like one of the things that's was really hard for me is when I created work and like and talking to an audience and realizing like, oh, okay, I just made a consumable for them, you know, like something to kind of reify their own either identity performance or their infatuation with the commodity of, you know, blackness, you know, like the thing that I get the most is like, you know, it's just like a black guy with a sword, like some sort of a phallic object in his hand. It's like one of the most popular images I could ever create, like always consistently, you know, and so I started to think about like, well, what can I do with my aesthetics to break that connection that the audience has with the aesthetic. And I think that's what's great about a sample for a black audience is there's going to be you're gonna look at that and you're not gonna identify with it. Yeah. It's like in a great way. Anytime you use, you know, and if you're, you know, my work is for a black audience. Like anytime you work with those graphics, you're gonna create a disassociation effect because it's like, you know. While even the J-Bo character is, you know, he's Jay-Z. Ain't nobody want to look at the sample and be like, oh yeah, that's like me. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like you're going, oh. So then you're forced to kind of think about the political and historical context of what you're looking at, and you're starting to question that as opposed to being like identifying, be like, oh yeah, I'm just like J-Bo. It's like,
well,
wait, am I?
Yeah.
You know, you know what I mean?
And this is a long tradition of cartoons using this aesthetic. You know, I was born in '83, so I grew up on Bosco, who was, in hindsight, like a blackface dog child, which is messed up, you know, a little bit. Mickey Mouse, same thing. He uses a lot of the same.
It's the language of minstrelry.
Yeah. So how do you feel about that when it's expressed outside of an American context, like Mr. Popo from Dragon Ball Z?
Oh man, I don't know if that got past the editing because but I did do a whole thing, and I want to do a whole newspaper on this on a whole bunch of stuff, like the phenomenon of those aesthetics and how they are moving back and forth. The aesthetic exists, right? There are a lot of things, like even the Kewpie is an aesthetic that was appropriated from the West, you know, into anime, you know, and it's often also kind of has a fraught relationship. Just to like take a little sidebar, the Kewpie, people say it's like, oh well, they're drawing these white, like that's somehow an aspiration to white
like innocence.
I I didn't really mean. I didn't mean literally. I'm speaking from the voice of like the observer, the Western observer, like the Occidental view on like how the QP is used. Is like, okay, they're drawing like white characters.
I see.
There are no Japanese people in anime, or there are no like black people in anime or whatever. Which is like, no. Well, the aesthetic it draws from QP, and I do think. Maybe the original intent, that infatuation is with something that is innocent and something that is cute, and also something that is a bit foreign, but not in the sense of like a self-loathing or something. I think for one's features, although there is a history of some things like this. And when I see Mr. Popo, I see an aesthetic that was appropriated to use like a fascination, because like Sambo was huge in Japan. Like they actually, I don't have all the dates and the info, but it was kind of bootleg the original story, which is a story about a South Asian child who is running from like a tiger, runs around a tree or jumps up in a tree, and the tiger runs around the tree until he turns into butter, which is like, but like that was really big in Japan, right? Yeah. And I mean, I don't know, you'd have to ask Toriyama, but like, I don't know where he got it from, but I'm sure that he was of the age at the right time to experience these graphics. In just the same way that he appropriates a lot of, there's a lot of Orientalism in Toriyama's work. And when I say Orientalism, I mean like the Western lens on Asia. In Dragon Ball, there's a lot of that. Like if you look at all of those characters, all of the heavenly characters, they are sort of shorthand of South Asian, like they have the South Asian look, right? And Mr. Popo is like, that is an appropriated graphic. Now, is it indicative of some inherent anti-blackness in the story or in the character or in Toriyama? I'd say, that's not my real... I don't know Toriyama. But I'd say no, but this is what subjectivity is. That image, even though it's appropriated and taken outside of its context, for us subjectively, it's still harmful, right? It can be harmful unless you have a subjective way of seeing the art, in which case you're like, oh, okay, no, this actually, he's just dark. Yeah. His darkness, even though he is a servant, right? His darkness in this subjective context is not sort of ridiculed, and his lips are not ridiculed. Like people have big lips, people have red lips, people have brown lips, people have all types of lips, right? And I don't think that's what he was trying to do. That's kind of like my take on it. However, it does not divorce the aesthetic language from its kind of original function, right? And I'm not going to say intent, but its function.
Yeah. And we've been saying aesthetic a lot. Would you describe it as a toolkit almost, or like a constellation of things?
I think in lab I quoted Adorno and his definition of aesthetics, but I would say like it's a regime of making and expressing, a toolkit for sure, right? But also that toolkit extends to the experience of the tools applied, right? Yeah. Like the application of the tools. So like when we say aesthetics, we're talking about like that
cause plus effect.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How old are you?
I'm 39. I turned 39 on the 28th of April.
So was there a lot of this kind of imagery around when you were a kid?
Oh, hell yeah, man. Yeah. Like, a lot of those old cartoons were still on, like I definitely got to see, I forget the name of her now, but the Mammy from Tom and Jerry.
Oh, yeah.
Literally never see her. I mean, you might have seen her face once. I think that stuff was always around. And like there are always little artifacts, little dolls and things you'll see somewhere,
or on somebody's lawn.
Yeah. Like I mean, in DC was a strange place because Black life was ubiquitous in a way that like that sort of thing would never occur to be like negative to me, But once you move out of that space and you have like a sort of different perspective on it, and you see how other people react to it.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, the Mammy, like I love Tom and Jerry. It's one of my favorite cartoons.
Aunt Jemima.
Yeah, exactly. She went from black to white, like they recolored her for the...
they changed her voice, too.
Yeah, and kind of, I don't say sanitizing is not the right word, but like making it appropriate for 80s babies instead of, like people born in the 20s when shit was cool. What do you think about things like that, where it's almost stitching it out of history?
I hate that shit, man.
Yeah.
I'm like, just show it. You know what I mean? If you want to show it, right? Mm-hmm. Because like you've already decided that its function as a product is more important to you than like, you know. So you still want to cake up off of it. You still want to get paid for it, right? You still want to, you know, use it. But like, and in a weird sort of way, you want to do that while at the same time not admitting that the original function of it, or like its space, like its relativity to the world that it came from. Mm-hmm. And you know what it means is when you see that, it's just the material world of that time and of our time, to be honest, created that imagery. So like by taking it out, you're in a weird sort of way denying that the historical reality.
It's sort of like cultural money laundering.
Yeah, for sure, it is. Yeah, that's a great.
Yeah, you got a question?
I just have a question on that. So sometimes I know the old Warner Brothers things, they put up like a disclaimer being like, we didn't change this because this is the way it actually was, and then they show it. And I was wondering, like, where does that sit in like the constellation of like cultural money laundering?
I don't know. It's like, it's a weird, the wording, I don't have the wording in front of me, but the wording is all, you know, it tends to slip into that, they were men of their time type of thing. Yeah. It's like, yes, which is not an untrue statement. Mm-hmm. It could also, you know, you could also append to that, it reflects the values of our time. You know what I mean? That's kind of like what goes unsaid, right? That's kind of how I feel about it. I think it's like, you gotta say something, you know, or you could just show it and keep it 100, you know what I mean? And like have, you know what I mean? And then like have, you know, it's very dangerous, just put it out there, you know? But I do think, if they are trying to promote a sort of subjectivity around the work, go ahead and talk about it. You know what I mean? Go ahead and talk about it. But it would...
It's hard to tell if that's earnest or just like a lawyer in a room was like, we have to put this on here or else people will sue.
Whether or not it's earnest is like, it is hard to tell. Yeah. But it's also irrelevant to me because like... you can just look at what the programming is, the contemporary programming is, and kind of like see about how earnest it is.
Yeah. Man, so we talked about Mammy and Aunt Jemima. Mm-hmm. How is the black woman cartoon differently from the black man? In the nigger aesthetic and the black aesthetic, really?
Yeah, man, like... man, how to unpack that? It's weird because I mentioned Bimbo too, right? Mm-hmm. And which was also sort of like a indigenous or like South Pacific, South Asian cartoon, which I think it's funny because like that word, which I use to refer to the aesthetic essentialization of like a woman's body, right? Started with a brown body, right? I think with the Mammy, it's crazy because like, and I'm just going off the top of my head, what makes it so difficult or there's so much to wrap your head around because it's like, the Mammy is like desexualized, but the body is still sort of like it's hyper physical, like the body, like she's, you know, she's still sort of like she's like a walking, a wet nurse wound, like cook, you know, and in a weird sort of way, like seeing how the aesthetics turn her into something different than what the aesthetics would do, say, to like a white, you know, woman body character, you know. I don't know, like, man, what was your question? Because I feel like a lot of it is me asking those questions in the work. Like I'm asking myself those questions. So like even in lab, it's like I'm not. I posit some answers, but a lot of it is me working through that. So like even with the Joker image, it's me kind of like asking those questions and interrogating like what the function is of these aesthetics, while at the same time hopefully producing something that triggers that same phenomena in the audience, like the creation of a critical framework that we can use to interrogate what these aesthetics are doing. You know what I mean? Which is like important to me and my work. And I'm hoping that it can it's like a viral thing that then when you go and you look at something else, you have a critical framework to kind of understand, or like kind of like not understand, but like interrogate aesthetics in general. Yeah. As opposed to just like consuming the aesthetic. And in a way, I'm very wary of just like consuming an aesthetic and like identifying with it and be like, oh, that's my story, and like I've been represented. And then it's like I feel when that happens, sometimes you're I think susceptible to just swallowing the pill of whatever it is you're looking at.
So you accept the parts that make you you, but alongside that are the parts where that were added to it, and like the poisonous side.
Yeah, and I don't think it's necessarily deliberate. It could just be a matter of the material reality or the political reality that produces those aesthetics. So just reproducing, the aesthetics reproducing kind of the material political reality, that produces the aesthetics. Yeah.
So the story of OJ thing, one thing I didn't know until I read your essay was that it was mostly a team of white animators who were, I assume, working under the guidance of a black creative director. I like to think so anyway.
Right.
How do you feel about that kind of thing where it's subverting the aesthetic to an extent, but it's from someone who doesn't have the experience of being harmed by the aesthetic? Like there's a lot of white cartoonists who do blaxploitation comics that just feel like shitty blaxploitation parodies.
Well, I think the reason why I wanted to make the newspaper is to kind of, I don't know if how much we've been really even asked to think about those things. So if you maybe you just see a comic, you just see those aesthetics, it just makes you feel good, or it's like it's it turns you on in a way, but like you never really question like why, or like what the aesthetics are doing. Working in that sort of pastiche, like that blaxploitation pastiche, it's like if you're just reproducing the pastiche, you're and you're not. Whereas in some cases, the original producers of those films or aesthetics have a political awareness of what they're trying to do with those aesthetics, and I think in those cases they're more often to be like subversive. But like if you're really just into sort of the appearance of them, and you're not really interrogating like politically what they're trying to do or doing, then you're maybe gonna just reproduce like certain elements of the environment that you're in with the surface of those things. You know what I mean? Like so a preoccupation with like black masculinity or like the libidinal aspects of the characters in a blaxploitation, because like that's what it is, even in the blaxploitation, that's what it is. And I think sometimes it happens in blaxploitation where it's like just people they're making a film. White audiences like to see that too, and they're just reproducing like sort of the white gaze in a weird sort of way.
Yeah. There was a comic last year, Howard Chaykin did, Divided States of Hysteria, that had a lynching cover. It was not pro-lynching, but it turns out if you do something that's too close to the real thing, it just looks like the real thing.
Yeah.
So it was almost just like a hate crime for no reason.
Yeah, my whole thing is like...
I shouldn't say for no reason.
Right.
There's no reason for a hate crime.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't really care what Chaikin's intent is, right?
Yeah.
Like, first of all, if you're gonna show that, like, what's your reason? Mm-hmm. You know, and you can answer that question, right? If you're selling a product that is using that, then there's like a commercial aspect to it. The commercial, you are selling the spectacle of the destruction of a body, right?
Yeah.
Your intent.
If you step on somebody's toe, their toe is still stepped on.
Right, the toe is still stepped on. Yeah.
Let's talk about Ralph Bakshi.
Yeah. Josh was mad because I actually didn't talk that much about it.
Yeah.
Let me just read the paragraph. Like,
here you go.
Yeah. I was going to write a whole thing on Ralph Bakshi's 1975 film Coonskin, but ran out of space, and I'm not sure the work deserves my effort. Despite some great performances by Philip Michael Thomas, Barry White, Charles Gordon, and Scatman Carruthers, as well as Bakshi's gorgeous designs, you cannot take that away from him. Coonskin also fails to achieve escape velocity from the original function of nigger aesthetics. Though the performances begin to subvert the flattening of the function of the nigger aesthetics, speaking to the performances of the performance. The story ultimately breaks down into a hollow spectacle for the white gaze of its director.
And you can kind of see that here, where I feel like this image is simultaneously beautiful and terrible. Like, from a pure arts perspective, the contrast, like the way the black faces just kind of sit on the other colors. Even, I don't know if that's a painted sky or a photo. That's got to be a photo, actually.
Yeah, he used a lot of photography.
Yeah, like there's something aesthetically pleasing about it, but then when you look a little closer, it's like, oh, all the black dudes are basically roaches, and like that's not that cool anymore.
There's something reductive. It's like, I feel like, well, if you do kind of play with that. This is why I made the newspaper, is to kind of like get people to interrogate like the ideology of the form itself. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So the ideology of the form of a sambo is like, it's to stigmatize like the black body. Mm-hmm. So then, like, what are you doing with the aesthetics to kind of counter that? You know what I mean? Like, I could say that maybe he's trying to. Like, what about the form of what you're doing is doing that, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, combining these two elements. Like, in J-Bo, like, the J-Bo character, I don't feel like it's not actually saying any, and to forget about the stripper that's in it.
Yeah.
Like, there's a stripper in it, right?
Yeah.
Man, it's just so much to unpack. You see how difficult it was just to like put all of that in like 3,000 words. Like, you don't understand how much I had to cut down, because like there's so much to deal with. Anyway, like, I don't see how the J-Bo character I don't see how it's any sort of an aesthetic critique or an aesthetic even illumination or sort of like a juxtaposition for you to think about the reduction of. And the lyrics, it's brilliant because the lyrics are doing the exact same shit, because it's taking like, nigga as a word. Mm-hmm. This is how we use it. This is the function of it. And like, it's so nuanced. It's not just ER or A or whatever the hell it is. It's like in the course of a record, you can hear nigga used in a way that is like subversive, mm-hmm. and also like reproducing. You know what I mean? Like, okay, well, that guy, like the way he said that word,
yeah,
he dehumanized. Like he's talking about it. It's like, yo, that's my nigga. It's like, fuck that nigga. Like, you're doing it. Like, it's a very, and I think that is radical in itself, because like it's taking away the reduction of what the word refers to, mm-hmm. and like that's what I think is something you can apply nigga aesthetics. Like, if you show how like complex the character is, yeah. I think it could be something too where it makes you start to think about like, well, the form is reductive, but why, but it's actually not. I think there's something that, but it is it's a laboratory, man. It's a lab for you to kind of like work out all of that. I don't know.
And does
that make any sense? Like,
I mean, I think
going on and on and on.
You're basically saying, like, instead of critiquing it or recycling in like a true sense, like taking it in and putting it back out. It's just sort of like, this is mine now. Like I'm going to use this aesthetic, and by using it, it means something different than it did before.
Is that what I mean? I don't know if that's what I mean.
I think that's what Jay-Z's doing.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
You got a question?
Yeah, you guys are talking about things that have been removed and how it pisses you off that they just take them out. You talked about they'll show cartoons, they'll put like a disclaimer on it. It got me thinking about how Disney just pulled Song of the South. Nobody ever gets to watch that again. But they left Dumbo, right? Full of crows.
Yeah.
Why are the crows okay? But like Song of the South gets yanked. Like what about
Song of the South is low-key terrible anyway. I was actually going to bring up the crows. I'm glad you said that, because as a kid, I didn't know they were stereotypes.
They're magpies.
They were magpies?
They have yellow beaks, right?
Is that the difference? I'm like, crows have yellow beaks, ravens have black beaks. I don't know anything about birds. But as a kid, they were cool because they acted like cool people. I didn't get that they were stereotypes of black people.
Yeah. Did Carruthers do one of those too? Like, I feel like that's that voice, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if they don't read hard enough, like if they don't read instantly and like hard enough.
Yeah, they could get away with it, basically.
And they could just be like, oh, what is it?
I think about it like this, right? I think about it like this, right? If you have you find out that there's like you own like a grocery store, right? And someone says like your provider hits you up, you have a whole bunch of, let's say, corn, just for the irony. You're like, okay, I shipped you a batch of corn. It's a bad batch. You can tell. I mean, it's all bad. It's a bad batch, but you can kind of tell some of them because, like, if you open it up, you can see where the boll weevil got into it, right? And then what you do is you go and you look at the corn and you see where you can tell if it's happened or not. You take those off, but you leave the other ones on it. Right? That's kind of what I think it is. I think that's all it is. You have a product that is noticeably offensive right now, so you take it off the shelf. You leave the rest of the stuff on. And I'm not going to go into, like, maybe what's wrong with a lot of Disney films.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, for me, you know what I mean? Like, for me, and like, subjectively, just kind of how I see, like, what I see wrong with them, I'm actually less interested in, being like, oh, that's bad, or that's bad, or this bad, or that's bad, and more interested in, like, creating, or sort of like cultivating a tendency for audiences to have a critical framework to look at all of the works, you know what I mean? To look at everything in a way and be like, okay, well, I'm really enjoying this. Like, I'm super into this, but this is certainly a fantastic spectacle of the assassination of the black radical imagination by, like, the black neoliberal imagination.
Is that Black Panther?
Say that. That was just an example.
Yes.
That someone could use.
You got a question?
I was like, because you talked about form, so in you're choosing a newspaper, so I'm gonna guess that you were inspired by Black Panther, not the Marvel superhero.
Yeah. Oh man. Like, I mean.
And how they because they started off as just a flyer, and that grew to like such a big newspaper.
And art was such a big part of that too.
Yeah, what's crazy is like, Emory Douglas and all that, like that's such a big part of like what my diet is. I never even thought of that, but certainly, but this gets into what I was saying about you kind of reproduce things, right? Like, so that is part of like that is my political subconscious, right? So, and I'm reproducing the form, of what kind of like, unintentionally.
Yeah.
But like certainly. Yeah. Jeez. Wow.
Right? Who else has questions? Anybody curious? In the back.
Yeah. I'll stand up so people see.
Hey.
So I'm sure you've probably heard a lot of like the kerfuffle about the Gambino video.
Yeah. He asked me if I wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
So not to be a dead horse, how there's like a division. Is this for white gays or is this for a black audience? Like, what was like your feeling like? Because at the same time, like I got like a feeling of reproduction, whereas other people may have got that, oh, he's being subversive. And like some people felt radical. To me, I didn't feel like it was all that radical because I've seen those images. So it's kind of like a weird, interesting balance of what's what being presented to us. Like,
So it's,
your thoughts on that?
Childish Gambino's "This Is America."
Yeah. Man, like it's like you wake up and it's like you got a whole bunch of messages. Like everybody in the queue think they showing it to you, right? It's like everyone is asking your opinion or whatnot. And like when I first saw it, I was like, wow, this is something to unpack. Like I'm so past, like I'm so tired of like just going for people, and I don't want to, put out like, what I mean? I don't want to put like my hot take. It's like I let it cool down. I'm not trying to burn my tongue. So I hold it. Then it's like I'm just like, well, I do think, first of all, the video is definitely made. Yeah, it's amazing. In an academic way, I can see like, wow, okay, I see what you're doing. I see, like the staging of it in a warehouse. Like this is very, very Brechtian. Yeah. At the same time, though, so to interrogate what its function is, I think all you have to do is look at Twitter. I think in a weird sort of way, it is working because it's creating a political dialogue around the aesthetics, which I think, if it's done that, I think that's great. You know what I mean? And to have people arguing about it, and maybe even arguing about the function of the aesthetics, is like, dope. I'm into that, I just didn't really like the song that much. But like, artists they're gonna make stuff, and like that's our job, just to keep making things, And I'll give him the credit of, just trying, Like, man, it's just good to see somebody try, man, and make a mistake. Like, maybe you reproduce something, right? But you're trying to say something, like, you're already like a step ahead, I feel like, as opposed to just accidentally reproducing it because, like, you want to show, like, fly gear and, like, the burner and, like, all that,
Yeah. Real 1992 shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Your question about the white gaze is really interesting because, like, I'm American, so I always think from an American perspective. Like, I think a lot of art in America almost has to be for the white gaze in some way, at least to a certain extent, just because that's how capitalism works. That's who you're going to be selling to. Dave Chappelle learned that lesson. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes it creeps up on you when you don't realize you're doing it. Have you ever had one of those moments where you're like, oh, like the wrong people are laughing at this for the wrong reasons?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
The funny thing is like, but it happens with other things too, Like it happens on some male gaze thing, you know what I mean? Which it forces me to kind of like interrogate what I'm reproducing in my work, Yeah, all the time. Like, I mean, that's why this is such an important thing for me, because I think it's almost like it's a fool's errand to expect to be understood by creating work, But I'm a fool, And at the same time, it's like, I think that's why, like, maybe where I'm at now is trying to foster a broader tradition of looking at things carefully, so that, because like, yeah, man, and I'm, it's conceited, but I just, I get so many cats coming up to the table talking to me about things, and I'm just like, it makes me, it's mortifying to me, man, like, it's, my ego is hurt to hear that what my work does or how it's perceived, sometimes it's like, oh man, like that's the exact opposite of what I was trying to do, but you really don't, you don't own the experience of your work, you don't.
We talked about it from a craft perspective, or like a person who draws perspective, but like it's just a straight up black man. How is this kind of research into the radical application of aesthetics? Like, how does that change for you?
It's crazy because it's interesting because just researching gives me like a bit of a new perspective on the relationship of like the black intellectual and black radical theory and its relationship to sort of like white academia. So like looking up Moten and Cedric Brooks and like, you know, Adorno and like you know, like kind of following back and seeing how someone borrows from something else. And like it's funny, like I was writing some drafts and I would send them to my homegirl who you know, she's going out for her doctorate or whatever. She's like the smart, she puts me on all of it. And I'm like, she's reading it and she's like, oh, you should cite, instead of citing, you know, whatever white guy, she's like, you should cite Moten here. And it's funny, she's like, well, I was reading Moten and he's who put me onto that guy. You know what I mean? And it's like, and it's interesting to think about, you know, like I've always been, not always, but like you know, I'm really into, you know, David Harvey, and like, so I'm, you know, checking out David, and then there's like seeing how some of the white intellectuals deal with it, and always kind of looking for the space where, you know, like, jumping back to Wilderson to kind of get this perspective, and also doing the same thing and like adding this component, and like, you know,
it seems like a never-ending journey.
I think it is. Yeah. You know, I'm just glad to be done for a little while with the newspaper, so that I can kind of start looking how I can like apply some of the way I've been thinking, or even ask the questions through my formal practice. Not that I didn't do that with lab, but
cartooning is different. Yeah. The like the vast breadth of black thought on the subject is interesting to me, because like I just really learned about Brazil and slavery and like how it was expressed there, how white supremacy is expressed, and like the black experience is infinite. And so things that like hurt me here might like heal me over here, or vice versa. So I love reading about stuff like this, because I feel like I have a pretty good handle on being black, black thought, figuring that kind of thing out. You know, I've been at this for 34 years, but there's always something more to learn, because no matter how down you think you are, no matter how much you think you have, like every one of us is unique. Now I feel like we're pretty simpatico, but like you're on a bunch of stuff that I'm not on yet, or you know, that I learned about. So yeah, y'all should pick up lab tomorrow. Any more?
It's got some funny comics in it too.
Yeah. I mean, is this the first time the Africa comic was printed?
Yo, no, it was printed in Meat House, but like this is a remix. I've changed some things. I've reduced colors, and also I did some like some places of the script I just did like an automatic, like there was a point where I was like, nah, you know, and it is representative of, you know, somewhere, mostly representative of where I was when I was like in my maybe like mid to late 20s. And, you know, with a little bit, the parts that I've changed are like, you know, it's my voice now, or like, you know. But yeah, this is the first time it's printed properly, because when it was printed in Meat House, it was kind of like cut off a little bit. Like, I guess, I don't know, they resized it to page or something. This is like, I think, the first time it's printed.
Yeah. You got a question?
I have, like, it's a complicated question in a way. I guess, like, I've been thinking about, well, okay, I guess recently I've been slapped in the face by being black and creating at the same time, and realizing like, okay, well, you know, I love what everyone else is doing and they're doing really great work and I don't want them to stop, but at the same time it's like, okay, well, I have to make a space for me, and hopefully if there are other people who are like into that, then like, yeah, that's great. Because I was just like, okay, well, there has to be other black people who are like also into monsters, right? And that's a whole complicated thing that I won't get into. But I was thinking about like, okay, in my particular context, I have recently started drawing more like women who are also like vampires and like dragons and all that sort of nonsense at the same time, right? And so it's just sort of like, do you sometimes feel like depicting, I guess, blackness onto things that like maybe might be fraught with like tension is like a thing that you struggle with, or like a thing that you think about a lot, or
do you mean like blackness as an analog, like something as an analog for blackness?
I mean like this woman I drew is black and she's also a dragon.
Yeah. I don't see the problem. Like, I don't know. Yeah, no. I think, because like I've been working on for a long time, like something that's dealing with, this sort of a thing.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting because, so for instance, maybe, I don't really, here's the thing, I don't really care about giving away ideas or anything like that. But one of the things that I'm dealing with is blackness and, say, all of the different types of romantic horror characters, right? And their relationship to human beings, right?
Right.
So if you mention a dragon, right? And you mention black, well, here's the thing about black characters and monsters is that a black body is post-human already.
Right.
Like it exists somewhere outside or adjacent to what it is to be human, right? And also when you're talking about these monsters, like the black body has already had this relationship with being consumed, know. So or having its reproduction sort of like either stigmatized or taken away, the right of it taken away already,
Right.
So I think. Nah, do that shit. Like, there's so much to do, right? There's so much to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Until you asked that question, I didn't know that I can't think of any black vampires outside of like the Eddie Murphy movie.
Yeah.
Well, there's also the sweet.
Blade.
No.
Oh, Blade is half vampire.
Wait, what's the one from the seven? No, what's the one from like Ganja and Hess, which was like a guy. Yeah. Thank you. Huh?
Yeah.
The Fletcher. Oh yeah. There's a.
I guess I got to pay more attention.
Shit movie, but she's kind of like exploring blackness in terms also in like things like vampires and things like that. I think that I do my creative work is kind of like, because like vampires, and goblins and whatnot, they come from a source.
Yeah.
And then like understanding that source within its culture, and I do that a lot, like not only as like.
Excuse me. What do you mean by a source? I don't know if I understand.
From like, for example, like if you read like the vampire hype, where did that come from? A fear of immigration and things like that. And what does it mean to take those sources and put it in a context that is...
I'm on that wave. We're on the same wave. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. That like kind of like subverts it and makes it your own narrative. And I do that a lot within like a lot of my creative works, especially being like African American and Haitian, and like our ties to zombies and vampires as well, and how there's definitely a space. We'll talk afterwards.
Yeah. I think you're gonna like it.
But that's a great example of how, like, I mentioned the breadth of the experience. Like, there are so many different angles you have to take into account when making things. I was going to say as a person of color, but really, like, everyone should do it. Because, like, dragons represent, like, greed, for example. So what is, like, a black dragon, what does that character's blackness have to do with the origins of the dragon? And sometimes people get it wrong where you're like, oh, like, is that what this is about the whole time? But when it's right, like, it's refreshing.
Right. There's a fetishization of the surface, too, in a lot of cases. Like, I know a lot of my first stories, or a lot of, I have a compulsion to create, like, a dragon just looks cool. You know what I mean? Like, I just want to draw it. You know what I mean? Like, it's got dope scales and stuff. Like, I want to draw it. Like, I don't have that as much anymore. I wish, like, I'm trying to find it sometimes. But, like, but it's, you have that aspect, and then you have the aspect, okay, like, well, what does this mean? So if you like go, for instance, I like the medieval artwork, because we're talking about Western dragons, right? Like, okay, I like this medieval representation of it, and I'm looking at the figures and I'm looking at everything in that. Now I'm thinking about like, well, the church's relationship to the depiction of the body, and like the church's relationship to the perception of the body, and how that gets like, how that produces these medieval, images, and like then what is the relationship of a dragon to the church? You know what I mean? Like, so, and then I think it's it gives you a lot more to kind of chew on and like to create things, and then you let it go, and like somebody just looks at it and says, I like this dragon. Right?
Yeah.
So we're out of time. Can we get a round of applause for this guy?
Ignorant Bliss can be found on ignorant-bliss.com. It can also be found on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Critical, the Movie Critics Network on Blog Talk Radio, on the Taylor Network of Podcasts, also on Twitter at IGBL Podcasts, along with my own Twitter at Julian Lytle, LYTLE. You can also support this show on Patreon, patreon.com/Julian Lytle. Thanks to all the people who support this show each month. Also, check out the show Culture Trapping, which I'm a host on, and the Speaker Talks monthly show on David Brothers' site, in which me, David Brothers, and Jamila Rouser talk about music once a month. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and see you next time.